Okay, now we are back. Is everybody ready? 나오미 나래. Okay, now we are waiting for the last presenter, Ms. Melissa Yuxing-Lo. Glad to meet you, Melissa. Yes, so, well, the last presentation is under the title Introduction to Article 6 of the Paris Agreement and Singapore's Carbon Pricing Act. It will be done by Melissa Yuxing-Lo from National University of Singapore, please.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I hope you can see my slides. Yes, I'll be presenting on action to Article 6. And this presentation, of course, is slightly different, I think, to what other colleagues on the panel have presented so far, primarily because I have come at it at more of a policy angle and less as an academic exercise, especially seeing that my work has mainly been in the policy space, but also as some of you have been following Article 6, this implementation of the Paris Agreement's Article 6 is still currently unfolding, right? So it's still being developed as we speak. So all of this is primarily observations as to how Singapore is implementing Article 6 of the Paris Agreement in order to achieve carbon neutrality and meeting our NDCs. So I will give you an overview of why Article 6 matters. How did it all begin? In the first place, even before Paris in COP21 in 2015. I will also cover the essential technicalities. So if some of you are familiar with existing carbon market rules, of course, we now are looking at some of these rules being transitioned, so that they comply with Article 6 rules. I also talk to you about corresponding adjustments, which essentially is when countries buy and trade carbon credits, whenever a host country who sells the carbon credits sells it to a buying country, there has to be a set of corresponding adjustments where the country that implements and draws down or offsets its carbon emissions, the selling country actually has to correct it or add emissions to their inventory. So this is, of course, during negotiations was highly controversial, but negotiators were able to finalize the arrangements for corresponding adjustments at Glasgow in COP26 in 2021. And then we talked very quickly about nesting and additionality and some of these baseline measurements, which are very important for the success of Article 6 and carbon markets. And then we talk about what governments are concerned about and what needs will be required in order to fully implement the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. And because I work in Singapore, I look primarily at the Singapore government position, what are the key policies and priorities in order to implement Article 6. And the main legislation is the Carbon Pricing Act. And finally, we enter into a short discussion about how academia researchers could play a role in helping to implement Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. So this is a very busy slide. I've taken this from a company called Gen Zero in Singapore, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Temasek state-backed investment company here in Singapore. And this really talks about how the background of Article 6, and this is not new. The concept of carbon trading is not new. The Kyoto Protocol back in 1997 had already introduced the first international carbon market system through the Clean Development Mechanism, right, CDM, at the time in 1997. So the principles go back quite far to 1997. And of course, over the years, many countries have had a number of experiences with emissions trading schemes, locally, domestically, regionally, and even we see some of this even being applied in particular sectors like aviation, right? So you see the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, had also announced its first sector-wide offsetting scheme back in 2016. So this is a very short history illustrated in this slide here. We've already sent the slide, so happy for you to look at it in detail yourselves. Before we launch into a discussion of Article 6, I have to explain to you what NDCs are. And here, this is me assuming that you don't know what NDCs are. I'm sure many of you are aware that under the Paris Agreement, climate targets are known as nationally determined contributions. All countries that are party to the Paris Agreement have to prepare, communicate, and maintain a successive NDC, and they have to update it or send a new one every 5 years, right? So each NDC needs to be more ambitious or represent a progression from the last one. So it follows the principle of non-backsliding. Now, the issue with NDCs is interesting because it was designed to be bottom up. Countries get to decide. They do their own calculations and understand their own situation, and then they come up with a contribution that they are comfortable with. And in principle, that should mean that they are more likely to achieve it, right? And they have buy-in. There's political buy-in because the governments themselves come up with these numbers. The cost that we face, of course, to this process is ambition, right? So if countries get to decide, the worry is that we are not going to meet our target or threshold. We will exceed the threshold of 1.5 degrees Celsius warming that we've set in the Paris Agreement. The other cost or downside or disadvantage to the NDC system in Article 4 is that the NDCs comes in all shapes and sizes. So you see the graphic illustration on this slide here. Contributions can come in many different forms. It can be outcome form, and even within outcome, it can be a greenhouse gas target, CO2 equivalent target, or it can be a non-GHG outcome, and in the form of renewable energy. So the metric would be gigawatt or megawatt. So it becomes very difficult for countries to actually compare across the NDCs, right? And that makes Article 6 trading very difficult as well, because how do you understand what other countries are doing, right, in their NDCs, and how do you assess whether they are able to sell you credits or not, and whether they are at risk of overselling to you and eventually maybe even revoking your agreement with them. And that can be very uncertain. It creates a lot of uncertainty and anxiety in the buying countries, countries like Singapore that buys these carbon credits, for example. So we are seeing, I mentioned 5 years, every country needs to submit a new or updated NDC. So the first round was 2015, 2016, right? The first set of NDCs. Countries were still not very sure, and they submitted targets that only took us to 3.7 to 4.5 degrees warming. So the trajectory was not in line with the Paris Agreement. But in 2020, 2021, countries submitted a new set. And here we see that Article 6 became more dominant or predominant in the NDC. So out of 143 countries that had submitted by the time of the cutoff for the synthesis report to be prepared, the Secretariat found that out of 143 countries, majority of them actually said that they would use Article 6 mechanisms or cooperative approaches, meaning they're not going to rely on their own domestic mitigation. They expect that they will buy and trade and sell carbon credits in order to help achieve the NDC. So this is showing that countries are interested to trade, and that if you are in a position in your country to explore carbon trading, then you need to ensure that the infrastructure, the capacity, the knowledge is there in order to help make this for it to come to fruition, right, and to implement it. So here we see that Article 6 was adopted at COP26. This was in 2021. Minister Grace Fu of Singapore, she's the Minister for Sustainability and the Environment in Singapore. She was co-facilitating the ministerial level consultations on Article 6 with Norway. And so this is her on the screen in the photo here. And I think that was a really significant moment for all countries because it meant that we had the basic rules for implementation. It was very, very challenging. As some of you who follow the COP negotiations will know, the rule book was supposed to have been concluded by 2018 in Katowice, Poland, at COP24, and Article 6 was delayed. So it took more than 3 years. It took, in fact, 6 years for countries to get to a conclusion. Part of the reason was because of corresponding adjustments, yes, but also other things, which we might come to it later. But the Article 6 carbon trading mechanism is actually very technical in nature and therefore very challenging for countries to adopt a political outcome. So it took 6 years. With the rulebook, we can see rapid implementation of international carbon markets to help countries achieve their NDC targets. But the implementation of the new rules will not be easy because every country has a different starting point, let's put it that way, right? Several countries around the world have experience in carbon trading. I showed you the timeline earlier. Several countries do, but most of the world do not have experience, long experience. So the rules will need to be digested, translated into domestic legislation, and I'll explain to you how Singapore has chosen to do this. And the other thing that is very big is environmental integrity, right? So how do we ensure that it's not just hot air? And I think all of you may be familiar with earlier this year, there was a very big scandal almost, right? So the Guardian newspaper, online news, had published a expose of a crediting mechanism standard, Vera, and said that their projects were not not doing what they said that they were doing. So the entire sector is now undergoing what we call a rigor revolution, meaning that everyone is questioning the environmental integrity of projects. I don't think it's a bad thing that we're doing it now. We're asking these right questions now, but this will cause some issues for the implementation of the Article 6. This slide is just to show you what were the key issues in Article 6 negotiations. I mentioned corresponding adjustments. This is just one topic, right, of the many issues in Article 6 negotiations. The metrics issue is a problem, as I mentioned earlier. So if Singapore has submitted, for example, our NDC is a CO2 equivalent. We are going to peak and come down and hit 60 million tons by 2030. But if we buy from another country that has, many different metrics, and then how are we going to ensure that they actually correct for the CO2 equivalent emissions that we have bought, right? The ITMOs that we have traded into their inventory. So these are some, just a few to mention here. Share of proceeds and adaptation fund is also interesting. So for instance, what countries did agree eventually in Article 6 was that for every unit that is sold, a percentage of the transaction fees has to go towards adaptation funding, and also it has to be cancelled towards overall mitigation of global emissions. So these two make up 7%. So for every 100 units, for example, that you buy, of carbon credits, you only get back 93 units, right? So these are things that the buyers and sellers and the marketplace needs to understand. Otherwise, it will be very challenging to implement. The Nature Conservancy put out a very useful explainer about Article 6. And so because of time constraint, we can't go into very much detail. But here you can see there are 3 different mechanisms of Article 6. The first is a bilateral sort of arrangement where there is a host country. So the project developer, the project is hosted in this country, let's say Indonesia, right? So then the country has agreed to host a project, let's say a reforestation project, and they can sell carbon credits that have been generated because it has been assessed that there is additionality to this project. And the buying country, for example, will then need to pay a certain price for each unit of the carbon that is traded. So once it's traded, it's called internationally transferred mitigation outcomes, or 6.2 units. And as I said earlier, um, the most challenging part, I think, of this is to ensure that the host country then adjust their inventory to account for that is being offset in the buying country. And just keep in mind that more than 100 countries want to use Article 6. So a host country can be selling to multiple countries, not just one to one, right? So the Kyoto Protocol, the scale of the flexibility mechanisms was a lot smaller than what Article 6 envisaged to be, because all countries have NDCs, many countries want to use Article 6. So under Kyoto Protocol, there was only 37 countries, right, developed countries that could access the flexibility mechanism. So and there was no such thing as corresponding adjustments at the time, right? So because the developing world basically did not need the carbon credits for themselves, because they had no formal CALROs to meet. Article 6.4 probably is a bit more familiar to those of you who are familiar with the Clean Development Mechanism. So basically, it's a centralized mechanism. The UN's FCCC Secretariat will host effectively a CARP, a centralized registry, and the countries can then buy and sell through that mechanism. So very similar to CDM. In fact, it will succeed the CDM when ready. Article 6.8 is really for non-market approaches, and there'll be different web platforms, online platforms to help countries to match their projects and interests. So there are some real essential things that you need to know about Article 6, and in order to fully appreciate, maybe we can't cover it all today, but I've already started to mention a few of them. So essentially, internationally transferred mitigation outcomes are mainly going to be used towards meeting countries' NDCs, and eventually going to be used towards meeting their carbon neutrality goals, right? Their net zero targets in 2050. So this is why this perhaps is relevant in this conference, because you are talking about carbon neutrality. But the other aspect is, think about why they have used this term, right? So internationally transferred mitigation outcome is very, very broad. And the reason for this is because it can be used for other mechanisms like COSIA, right? So countries are already talking about using Article 6 units for the achievement of their carbon offsetting scheme in international aviation. So buying it for the airlines to offset their emissions, right? So there are some broad applications for Article 6 units. Again, very heavy slide, I know, but you can take some time after this conference maybe to look at it a bit further. And this is all online already. If you go to the COP26 outcomes, you'll see this. Article 6 rules define what internationally transferred mitigation outcomes are. Essentially, they have to be real, verified, additional, and they can only have occurred from 2021 onwards. So anything that was generated before 2021 will not be counted towards Article 6. And it has to be authorized by the host country for a particular purpose. So if, let's say, within the initial or implementation agreement, the two countries, right, buying and selling, say that it's used for NDC, then those units can only be used for NDC. Right now, countries at the COP meeting are trying to discuss whether there can be a change in the purpose and at what point in the agreement. So the rules are not set in stone, and it allows for some flexibility for discussion, because right now we're trying to figure out how to implement it, right? And what's the best use of those forms and templates, so to speak. There's only been one initial report by Switzerland. Switzerland has agreed to work with Vanuatu, Ghana, and Bangkok for a few carbon projects. Switzerland, for example, has said that they need 30 million tons by 2030. So that's a big demand, right?
You have 5 minutes.
Sure, thank you. So with Article 6, really you see that there are many, many rules on how to approach bilateral and multilateral arrangements. And in order for a country to use it, to implement it well, you really need to understand these rules and go in and also you need to be very good at accounting because yeah, the corresponding adjustments will be very challenging if countries don't report it properly and there'll be disputes. So I'll skip very quickly to Singapore so you get a flavor of what we're doing here in Singapore. We can obviously, if the discussants want to talk a little bit um, about the other things, we can go back to it. But so Singapore has announced that it plans to develop itself into a carbon services hub. We have now actually more than 100 carbon services and trading firms in Singapore. And we envisage that we will continue this effort to develop expertise. The World Bank has also set up a climate data action trust in Singapore. And this is to enhance transparency and to prevent double counting. And of course, there are many other forms of engagement with businesses like accelerators to try and build capacity and interest in certain kinds of projects, for example, nature-based solutions. Our government has been very active in helping to set the new rules and norms around international carbon markets. So Mr. Benedict Chia, who is pictured here 2 times, he is the Director General of the National Climate Change Secretariat, and he was sitting on the ICAO COSIA Technical Advisory Board to develop the eligibility of the units, and he also oversees Singapore's efforts together with the Ministry of Trade and Industry and the Ministry of Sustainability and Environment on carbon credits. So we're very active. We always present at many of these meetings, workshops, technical dialogues, because we ourselves want to use Article 6. And in order to do that, we also need to understand what environmental integrity means and to different people. So we have signed memorandums of understanding with several standards agencies. Here I've mentioned Vera, Gold Standard, Global Carbon Council. Earlier this year, we added 2 more, the American Carbon Registry and the Architecture for REDD Plus transactions to the list of standards. And in fact, we just published about a month ago the principles for eligibility for Singapore. I mentioned that the World Bank and IETA has launched the Climate Action Data Trust. So again, we're very keen to host different players in the ecosystem to help us develop the carbon services hub. Here I'll just skip through very quickly. It's basically the same text. We've signed agreements with Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, Colombia, Morocco, Peru, Papua New Guinea. All here is to develop carbon projects, right? So Singapore wants to buy carbon credits. We don't know how soon some of these will translate into real projects. Kenya and Ghana, of course, in Africa, Ghana is probably the first country that we're going to sign with. We are told that this is final stages already, but we have yet to see the formal implementation agreement. There are other countries, of course, as well. So here you see Colombia, Chile, Dominican Republic, Mongolia, and Bhutan as well. So very recent. All of these happened this year only. And the reason why is because we are going to peak our emissions at 65, and we've set our new target at 60 million tons, but we also have announced a net zero target in 2050. So getting from 60 million tons to 0 in 2050, right, from 2030 to 2050 is going to require some form of use of the carbon markets. So here is just a real quick breakdown about Singapore's emissions. And the Carbon Pricing Act actually covers mainly the industry and power sectors, which is like 84% of our emissions. So it's the right sectors that we've addressed. The carbon tax will be increased from $5 over the last 5 years to $25 next year for 2 years, then $45 2026 and 2027. By the end of the decade, it will be $50 to $80. So very aggressive increase in the carbon tax to facilitate the use of the international carbon credits. So yeah, I think we should probably end there, just so that we have time for discussion. And thank you very much for inviting me.
Okay, thank you. Well, we know that we are doing something to keep the environment, but it's not easy, and we cannot deny that we are working on. But at the same time, the two, well, climate accords, for example, Paris Accord and Kyoto Protocol can be taken as the typical example of an involuntary defection in international negotiation. Okay, thank you. Thank you all the presenters for your effort and insights. And we have 5 discussions, and I will give 10 minutes to each of you. And when you raise questions to a certain presenter, please designate him or her when you make questions. And well, I give the mic to Professor Kim Do-hoon from Hankuk University of Foreign Studies, please.
Hello, my name is Do-hoon Kim from Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. And first of all, thank you all presenters for delivering valuable lessons and insights on the environmental and energy issues. And my discussion mainly focuses on Zlata's presentation. And I think your presentation on carbon neutrality and the cost of implementing CCUS solutions was very enlightening, and I appreciate the depth of analysis in your presentation and highlighting the economic and environmental implications of CCUS technology. Since I'm not an expert in this issue, so I'd like to raise a few questions instead of further discussion on this issue. The first question is that you mentioned that managing upstream emissions at the producer side is the most feasible plan. And among those countries, cost-effective countries are Russia and Qatar, you designated, and which are the most important and significant supplier and exporters in the realm of international energy trade. But at the same time, this is one of the most sensitive and dangerous regions in international politics. The ongoing conflicts between Russia and Ukraine for nearly 2 years, and the escalating Israel and Palestine conflict with the potential to spread to surrounding Middle Eastern countries. So I think it's the most significant concern on this issue. So wars and conflicts in such regions often involve embargoes or economic sanctions or blockades. And these international political factors are likely to hinder the development of solutions you mentioned. And what are the prospects for the international carbon neutrality governance, in your opinion, on this issue? And the second question is that you have emphasized the role of producer and exporting countries. But as your title of the presentation shows, that there has to be a cooperation from both sides, producer and consumer. So, which means the importing countries also should play a crucial role on this issue. But I think you have to more mention on this issue, especially those countries in East Asian countries, such as China, Japan, and South Korea as well. So what kind of effort do you think those East Asian countries can make on a policy base? And I have another question to Naomi Chi. It's a quick question, and I was surprised that Hokkaido is becoming a new region to grow rice, and I saw an article from your slide that also the former prime minister has mentioned that the rice is getting better in Hokkaido, and the next sentence was that there is an expert says that the yeah, exactly. So I'd like to ask what the meaning of his mention about this issue. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Professor Kim. When it comes to the answers, well, I'll give the mic to the presenters after all the discussants made their comments, okay? And next discussant is Professor Chung Sun-mi from Hankuk University of Foreign Studies, please.
Thank you for inviting me to this meaningful seminar today, and it's an honor to be a discussant in this session. All the speaker's presentation was really interesting, and I learned a lot. My field of study is energy politics, especially Russian energy relations. Professor Naomi's presentation was particularly interesting to me because Hokkaido's net zero policy is quite similar to Russia's carbon net zero policy in regards of forest absorption. In your article, you mentioned about the Hokkaido Forest Absorption Source Promotion Plan. So Russia's net zero 2050 policy is also focused on forest absorption as a method of achieve net zero by 2050. However, Russia's carbon net zero policy has been criticized for its over-reliance on carbon neutralization by forest absorption. So this is because the effectiveness of carbon neutralization by forest absorption has been questioned. Therefore, I would like to ask about the absorption capacity of Hokkaido's forest and what the Hokkaido governments do to increase forest absorption capacity. And secondly, I would like to ask you about the Japan's approaches toward nuclear power. As you mentioned, renewable energy has instability problem, so it is hard to fully cover the energy demands by renewable energy. Also, after Russia-Ukraine war broke out, energy security becoming a main security issue to the countries, including Korea. Therefore, nuclear power is once again gaining attention worldwide, including Europe and Korea, as a clean energy sources to secure energy security and cover energy demand. However, I think approach to nuclear power could be different in Japan because of the Fukushima disaster in 2011. Therefore, it would be great if you could share Japan's approach to nuclear power in a carbon neutral plan.
Okay, thank you, Professor Zhang. And maybe Professor Chi gets a lot of questions now. And next discussant is Dr. Shim Chang-seo from Korea Environment Institute, and he's an expert of atmospheric environment. So we expect some valuable insights from him. Please.
Okay, thank you. I'm Chang-seo Shim again. And actually, this is third year for me for this conference. And I think every time I sit here and I try to say the current kind of significance of climate change or significance of environmental issue. And now I want to I want to say that all kind of impressive the talk probably to have this kind of conference every year, and every the lessons from each country probably give us a very helpful message, and also we can have a very nice chance to share this experience. Actually, so I don't have much questions for this talk, and I want to add some of my comments for this conference instead. And actually, the last year, the World Meteorological Organization, which is a very strong partner to IPCC, you know the IPCC, and they gave a message that there is a 50-50 chance of the annual average global temperature temporarily reaching 1.5 degree above the pre-industrial level for at least one of the next 5 years, which means that probably we can watch what's going to happen until 2027. We can watch, we can fail or success our goal of reaching our goal below 1.5 degree. So this is very serious. This year, the sea level temperature, sea surface temperature of Gulf of Mexico reached almost 37 degree, which is probably higher than our body temperature. So the head capacity of the water is 10 times more than the atmosphere. So considering what we watch today is, I can say, strongly say, which is more than we expect based on our climate scenario. And so we probably may take this message very seriously. So that's I want to add this point. And also I want to share some main strategy to reach the carbon neutrality, because our the topic of this conference is carbon neutrality for international issues. And first thing is we have to adjust our the policy for renewable energy. From the recently the Nature the published paper which said probably next 30 years the solar power energy gonna be dominant, which is a very interesting projections, but this is probably very reliable message from because this is the Nature published that paper. And for me, which is not simple, because we sacrifice in Korea a lot of land and a lot of mountains for the solar energy, and the reverse impact is also we can watch these days. So like so we have to think about the panel recycles and efficiency of the solar power, which is very different from the country. So that has to be also considered. And also the in Korea, like I said, we have very limited land area. So we in Korea we have to apply the solar panels in the buildings instead, and not for the natural land, which is a very important message. And also we need wind power as well. And we already invest a lot of money in coastal area already, and which is kind of personally very painful, because these days, like Japan and Europe, they invest more in the advanced technology, which is offshore wind power, which is less environmental impact and less like ecosystem impact, and which is more we can get more wind power. So like that, we have to reduce and trial and error, and that may helpful and to reduce our loss of investment. And second strategy is that we do not want to sacrifice the natural resources due to the carbon neutrality. So like I said, we have to save forests and mountains and green fields, and we do not want to sacrifice those things due to the development of renewable energy. So the third strategy is our carbon neutrality the policy should go with the recycles of materials. So for example, Korea is a leading country in terms of ESS. You know what is ESS, like batteries and energy storage systems. And we produce a lot, but we still do not fix the policies for the recycle of those materials, which is going to be another huge waste in the future. So that's why we have to also rapidly set up those recycles policies, and that's going to be another a very tight issue with our future. For example, we already catch a lot of fine plastics in the ocean, and I heard that some like international paper published that in the Arctic area, in the air, they captured the fine plastics already. So that means this kind of plastics probably impact huge in the future in our health. So in those facts, we have to reduce the classical plastic productions, and we have to think another way to go for the sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shim. Well, he made comments regarding the general statement of nature preservation, and we agree that we should reduce the trial and error. But so that's why we are here, as a way of improving the ways of supranational cooperation and reaching carbon neutrality. Okay, the next discussant is Professor Lee Sang-hyun from Jeonbuk National University. I give mic to him. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Sang-hyun. I'm a political scientist. My specialty is Latin American political economy, focusing on energy and mining sector. First of all, thanks all presenters for your wonderful presentation. I'm impressed by depth and relevance of your research. I found out there are many strong and interesting points from your presentation. So I'd like to discuss all these points now one by one. However, due to time constraint, I'd like to focus on a specific question to Dr. Chen. Yeah, Dr. Chen, how do we apply your research to other countries like Korea, considering many aspects of political economy to determine energy policy? For example, both Korea and Taiwan have a highly energy consuming, industrialized, and export-led economy. So in this situation, it is really difficult to raise energy price, including electricity price, right? So how do we balance between urban energy governance, which you propose, and the economic development strategy? So could you tell me, is there any innovative solution for this policy making?
Is that all? Okay, thank you. So Professor Yi raised questions regarding the applicability of Taiwanese case to Korean case. So the last discussant is Mr. Sakaguchi Hiriko from Mainichi newspaper. He's a journalist, and he will raise questions with the viewpoints of a journalist. Please.
Thank you very much. And I'm Hirohiko Sakaguchi of Japan's Mainichi newspapers. I'm so honored and to be here, and I'm very much happy with coming to this beautiful YEOSU for the first time in my life. And mainly, I have two questions focusing on one is wildfire, and another is local government role. Simply because I'm a journalist, I would like to tell you a story based on my coverage. I reported wildfire occurred at the Inansa Mountain, which is very much popular in Seoul, in April of this year. I actually went to the site and I was really surprised. It smelled very scorched and the trail was completely burned. Not to mention economic damage, the impact on the ecosystem was enormous. The emission of air pollutants was also severe. As the temperature rises, wildfires naturally increase too. Many wildfires around the world symbolize the seriousness of climate changes. What was even more surprising was that it took less than 30 minutes to walk from the residential areas. It's crystal clear wildfire really risks human lives too. So I would like to have a question to Professor Sataramani. Actually, Indonesia is a very much famous country, famous as a country with plenty of rainforest in the world. So forest fires on the increase actually, and is there a growing sense of crisis and anxiety among the people in Indonesia? And how does the Indonesian government respond to increasing wildfires? This is my questions to Professor Sata Ramani. A second question is to Professor Naomi Chi, Hokkaido University. Thank you very much. And Naomi-san mentioned the Hokkaido local government is trying very hard to take the initiative to deal with climate change proactively. At the same time, I think there are times when it is not 100% consistent with the policies of Japanese central government. How do two sides, both sides coordinate opinions to cope with climate change? This is a question what's on my mind, and I am happy if you give me a few additional remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sakaguchi. Okay, so I give the mic to the presenters. First of all, I give mic to Ms. Sergeyeva in June. Please. Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear discussants. And now I would like to address the points raised by Professor Kim. Thank you very much for your thoughtful questions. And answering your first question about the international conflicts and the prospects of cooperation on CCS between the producers and consumers, especially in those difficult regions such as Middle East. Yes, indeed, it is. Now we have a lot of concerns from the point of view of political stability. But let's not forget that the relation actually can go the other way around. If carbon becomes, the idea of carbon as a service, and actually Melissa, when she was speaking about Singapore turning it into a hub, actually Middle Eastern countries also want to turn themselves into different kinds of energy hubs, hydrogen hubs, CO2 hubs. So if they understand that the interest from the consumers is very high and the consumers are ready to invest and buy future products, actually they might be more interested in securing their political stability in order to prevent disruptions, to be able to secure the future gains. And also another solution could be that other potential sources of implementation of carbon capture and storage, such as Australia. Now Australia is being very active in this field. So probably if Australia looks into the international situation, it can understand that from the political point of view, it is actually very well located to secure projects that can be stable and reliable. So yes, the costs of implementing CCS are much higher, but probably Australia and the other producers and consumers would go that way to make sure that the project takes place no matter what. However, let's remember that Qatar, for example, it exported 21% of LNG globally in last year, 2022. So if its political stability gets disrupted, it's not only the question of the future projects, but also it will severely affect the energy security of the whole world in the current energy system as we have it now. Speaking about the cooperation of producers and consumers, and especially the role of importers in ensuring the global standards, I think that actually these are the importers, the consumers, who should play the leading role right now, because they, through regulation, they can set the example and sort of set the benchmark for all industry participants by explaining what they want to see. I think Japan right now is actually playing a very prominent role in this, because Japan was the first country who on the semi-government level claim that it is going to be welcoming carbon neutral LNG. Because as you know, after the commitment to become carbon neutral by 2050, by the Prime Minister, actually Japanese gas industry followed this commitment and issued their own statement that they would want to become carbon neutral by 2050. And they even developed a roadmap how to get there, where they highlighted that carbon neutral LNG is going to take approximately 5% of the resulting energy of the resulting gas balance. And also importers can participate in projects together with the producers. Again, the example of Japan, they want to develop e-methane, and that's why they form, like several Japanese producers formed a consortia that is going to develop a feasibility study in the US together with the potential producers of e-methane to invest together and to explore the options for this new fuel. So the role of importers or of consumers should be both regulatory and also the financial. Thank you so much. I hope I answered your question in time.
Thank you, Ms. Sarayeva. And we have more time to talk about that when we finalize the manuscript that you, well, submitted today. Okay, so I give the mic to Dr. Sitaramani. Yeah, but, well, you can answer your questions, and if you want to make some comments, please.
Okay, hello. Regarding questions about the real fire by the I think the real fire in Indonesia is very hard to control, and it's very difficult to determine the cause of this real fire. And then, in my opinion, it's the temporary measures by local government is not enough. It's because they implement such a policy to limit outdoor activities like that. But I think it's not enough to solve the wildfire problem in Indonesia. And then I'm not really sure about those aspect in particular, because that's not my area of research. But yeah, I would say that the local government is not too much about this fire problem.
Thank you. Yeah, water supply is needed to solve the problem. Okay, so, and I give the mic to Ms. Melissa Lowe, and if you want to make any comments and if you want to answer questions, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to come in. I didn't get any specific questions, but I don't know if many of you know, but I actually spent most of my career at the Energy Studies Institute. So I missed CETA when I was there, but yeah, I think the topic on energy is extremely relevant to carbon neutrality, right? And the truth is, I think even in my work in carbon markets, I do feel that it's a bit of a distraction to what really needs to happen, which is decarbonization. So I believe that the work that everyone here is doing is really important. I just decided to make the switch because I think this area of carbon markets, you need some understanding of energy in order to make it robust, but also that the area of nature-based solutions, and again, lots of discussion about forests and how to protect forests is very relevant here. So yeah, happy to stay in touch with all of you and to see how we can even explore any further collaboration on how we can best include more robust methodologies and strategies to advance climate action. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I give the mic to Professor Chan.
Oh, okay. I thank the professor in the question. So maybe in my opinions, the lifestyle in the Korea is the same with the Taiwan. So from my result, the background of the social economy variable is very strong impact the energy consumptions. So my result indicate the class 4 is have a high income and about to be retired coming soon. So have a lot of the staying home. So uses the energy of the appliance. So maybe the lifestyle transitions is very challenging in the Taiwan and the Korea. From the Taiwan, the governments maybe adopt the electric price in the apart. This year, but the no action for the occupant behavior in my questionnaire the survey. So maybe in my opinions, I recommend the decentralized renewable power plants is useful for the CV engagement is a stronger impact the energy policies than the adopt the lifestyle transitions. Maybe in the Korea, you can recommend the overall a lot of the rooftop PVs development in the buildings to set up the decentralized energy systems for the every stakeholders is a very useful the reduce GSG emissions in this issue. This is my opinions. This very useful in the Taiwan. Okay, and on the other hand, I will feedback the Professor John from the KEI. In the Korea have a very mountain to set up the solar power plant, but in the Taiwan the license of the land use is very difficult from the stakeholder. So I recommend the Professor E is developing the rooftop the PV is very useful in the Taiwan. So this pathway is maybe the useful in the Korea. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, anyway, electricity. Yeah, and well, a lot of questions and a lot of answers can be here. Professor Chi.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much, everyone, for your questions and comments. I will take them one by one. The first question by Professor Kim. So for those of you who do know Aso, it's Aso. But for those of you who don't know him, he was the Prime Minister, and he also is the Vice Prime Minister at the time, for the moment. But he is known to be quite ignorant, and so the comment that he made about how Hokkaido rice is so tasty and delicious, and it's thanks to global warming, obviously he doesn't, but it just sort of presents itself as him being very ignorant. So what the experts said right after he made that comment was that it's not that the rise in temperature, of course, has some effect, but it's very minimal. In fact, what's more important is the technology in Japan to make hybrids of different types of vegetables, and also just because they have a very high level of skills in agriculture, right? And so the production of rice is due to the technology, the innovative technology to produce rice, not because of temperature rise. Yeah. So that was what the experts were trying to say, like telling him, just that he was ignorant. So that's the answer to your question. The forced absorption. Thank you very much for asking that question. I actually brought our local government's zero carbon plan. It's right here. Yeah. It's part of. So it's a part of a package. So it's not just about forest absorption, but it's also greening the city, and also using organic fertilizer, and also what we call blue carbon. So it's not just forest, but also they are trying to promote the absorption of carbon dioxide using the algae in the ocean. So this is a very big thing in Hokkaido, the blue carbon, one of the, I think, leading regions in Japan. So this is all part and package of the greening of the city using blue carbon and forest absorption. And there's not, the way the Hokkaido government has promoted it is not that there isn't a very heavy emphasis on just forest absorption, but everything needs to be done in parallel. So renewable energy is very important. Forest absorption is also important. Blue carbon is also important. We need to do everything at the same time. So there shouldn't be an overemphasis on only one policy, but sort of, the combination of all these policies should. Well, at least the idea is that would promote the reduction of the emission by 48% by 2030, which is very, very, it's very. I think it would be difficult to reach, but that's the plan right now, is to reduce 48% by 2030, and then zero emission or zero carbon by 2050. Also, just to mention a thing about blue carbon, Japan is actually cooperating with Philippines and Indonesia to promote the use of blue carbon, and JICA is part of promoting this. So I just wanted to mention that as well. Nuclear power plant, yes. Japan is very unique in the sense they have the power plant villages where there are cooperation between businesses, academia, and bureaucracy, and they were very important in pushing for nuclear policies in Japan. Then, of course, 2011 we had the big earthquake, and we had the Fukushima disaster, and since then, of course, there is the opposite. There is the people are much more, they are much more knowledgeable on nuclear power plants. Also, there is opposition towards activating the power plants. So just to give you some numbers, there are 16 power plant stations in Japan and 54 furnaces, of which only 11 are reactivated now. But that's really an amazing thing in Japan, because previously everybody thought that nuclear power was, the new, the new power, right? It's clean, efficient, and everybody thought it was a great idea. But after Fukushima, obviously people think, otherwise. And even with the promotion of and the active pro-nuclear NPOs in Japan, there's a lot of advocacy towards reactivating these power plants, but their efforts have been sort of minimized, and as I said, only 11 have reactivated since 2011. Now, the 11 furnaces that have been reactivated in Japan, they're in one part of Japan. It's actually the western part of Japan, and the reason is because it's very political. The political power in the Osaka region, Ishin no Kai desu ne. It's the Japan Innovative Party, and they are pro-nuclear, yeah. And so the reason why they reactivated the 11 furnaces in the western part of Japan is so that they can decrease the electricity, the cost, and that is to gain support for their elections. So that's one of the reasons why you see a concentration of reactivation of the furnaces in the western part of Japan. What was the other question? So that, oh yeah, and in Japan, for those of you who are familiar with Japanese civil society, Professor Robert Pekkanen from University of Washington, he talks about how Japan, the civil society is the Japanese civil society is very much members without advocates, but the pro-nuclear NPOs are actually the opposite, advocates without members. And it's because there is the stakeholders, businesses, academics, and bureaucracy that works together for the pro-nuclear, sort of advocation. And so that's sort of interesting thing about Japan and Japanese civil society. And the question by concerning, and one more thing. And there's also now many women's group and mothers group that are very much against reactivating the power plants. Right after Fukushima, the mothers actually mobilized themselves so that they could advocate, the compensation for their children, and also, safe and sort of encouraging safety. And so there is still very much anti-nuclear sort of advocacy also. So we find pro-nuclear advocacy, but we also have much more, a larger anti-nuclear advocacy. And the last question about the inconsistency. Now, Hokkaido, as you know, historically speaking, used to be the support for was very much stronger for the Democratic Party, not the ruling party LDP. So they've always been, they supporting the Democratic Party, and so maybe that's I think one of the reasons why there is sort of that there are a lot of local governments in Hokkaido that don't really want to follow the central government. And also, if you don't, I don't know if you remember, but about 20 years ago, there was this discussion of Hokkaido becoming independent. Now, of course, that was only a small group of people, but the idea that Hokkaido can actually self-sustain itself. And so that's, you see this opposition between Hokkaido and the central government. That's always been around. That's why there's always been strong support for the opposition. And many of the Hokkaido local governments, they try to rely less on government subsidies and try to create their own innovative ways. And that's one of the things I think is really interesting about Hokkaido, is that they try, I mean, not all local governments, but there are some local governments that are very much keen on trying to be more creative so that they don't have to rely so much on the central government. So that is in different, that's also not only in the environment, like not only policies toward climate change, but in policies for various things, for social services, and also all aspects of the policy. Is the Hokkaido's local government is very much sort of not in tune with the central government. They try to be a little bit more unique. So that's my response to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ji. Okay, so, well, it's been a long time. And anyway, I have to express my gratitude again to my colleagues from abroad, Singapore and Saudi Arabia, and all the presenters and discussants of today. We are talking about the environment and nature preservation and climate change and all, but unfortunately, at the same time, at some other places in the world, a lot of people are losing their precious lives every day. So, and in a sense, well, keeping environment is not an imminent problem, and we cannot watch it right now. We just expecting that something will come. But so, well, maybe it's a problem of die today or die someday in the future. But yeah, we have to solve the problem, and that's why we need supranational cooperation and communication as a way of improving the solidarity of humankind. And I would like to borrow Martin Luther's maxim to end this session. Even if I knew that tomorrow the world would end, I would plant an apple tree today. Yeah, this should be the slogan that we keep in mind to, well, make the Mother Nature healthy and, well, leave the precious earth to our descendants. And I hope that next year, well, we can invite you guys from Singapore and Saudi Arabia, and we want to meet you ladies in person. And thank you again, professors and Mr. Journalist and other participants from, well, all around the world, and the guest of today. And let this be the end of the session, and thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.